In this video, let's just talk about some basics of Cloud SQL security. So here I am back in Cloud SQL, and here's the database we created earlier. Let's click on the database to go into its details, and first of all, let's click Connections. Now notice up at the top, under Connectivity, you have two checkboxes here, Public IP and Private IP. So the default is to allocate a public IP address for your machine, which you can use to connect to it, and not to allocate a private IP address. Well, we can change that if we want. If we check Private IP and then enable the API, that'll allocate to our database server a private IP address, and we can create a network peering between the network that Google creates, which hosts our Cloud SQL network, and whatever network we own within this project. So notice in this project there are two networks, default and DugNet. If I select default as the associated network, then a machine has to be in that network to communicate with our backend database via the private IP address that is created. If I chose DugNet as the associated network, then only a machine in that network would be able to communicate with our backend database. If you allocate a private IP address, then you might also want to deallocate a public IP address. Now again, this will take away the public IP, so only machines within the network specified here will be able to communicate with your database via the private IP address that is generated. Clicking on Allocate It and Connect will set up that network peering for us. Okay, now if we do give our machine a public IP address, that doesn't mean every machine in the world can try to access our database. Google puts a firewall in front of the network where our database exists. So by default, no machines outside that network can access the database unless we authorize those networks. And we did this a little bit earlier in the course when we created a virtual machine to connect to our backend database. So again, I think most organizations feel like only allocating a private IP address to our database is the right way to set it up. But however, you can securely add a public IP. Just be careful which networks you authorize, and don't authorize any networks that you would not want to give access to those machines. The other thing we should take a look at is down here in the SSL section. By default, you do not have to use an SSL connection to connect to your database. If we want to force a secure connection to the database, notice we can click on that button to only allow secure connections, and then down below here we can set up certificates that we can use to ensure only a valid SSL connection is used when connecting to our database. Anyway, in this demo we wanted to take a look at a little bit of security for Cloud SQL databases. This is Doug Renstrom with ROI Training.